Thanks for watching. We're so glad you could join us for another episode of The Catholic View for Women. I'm Teresa Tomeo, along, of course, with my beautiful co-hosts, Janet Marana and Astrid Bennett Gutierrez. So, ladies, we are now in part 3 within the new season, taking a closer look at what the Holy Father said on that now famous press conference on the way back from World Youth Day. Of course, that famous quote we've heard so often. It's been misused, misapplied, misunderstood. Who am I to judge? Right. So in the first 2 episodes, we actually looked at this whole issue of homosexuality and what the Church teaches. Now, the Holy Father was actually asked about homosexuality in the clergy, but the media really just took what they wanted to hear and ran with it. And we know it, the Holy Father, when we look at the statement in context, is talking about the issue of not judging a person's soul that is left up to God. That's what he meant. He was talking about salvation. He was talking about mercy. The world took it to mean license to do anything you want with whomever.
Well, and also, too, I think the world or the media took it to say, now we can show everyone that maybe the Church is going to change its teaching on marriage, you know, because the whole marriage debate, as we know, especially in the States, is going by state by state by state with trying to pass gay marriage. And I think what happened was they took that phrase and said, this is great propaganda for our cause, for getting same-sex marriage accepted. The other thing, too, is, Teresa, you know, it was just one little paragraph out of a whole host of questions where the Holy Father covered a whole broad range of topics. You didn't hear one peep about any of the other things the Holy Father said, but that one thing. That's what they latched onto, and that's what they exploited.
Well, let me read the quote again, and then we'll get into a clip from one of our guests, Dan Matson, who's working with the wonderful Ministry of Courage. This is what the Holy Father said. Again, this is on the way back from World Youth Day. Gay people should be integrated into society instead of ostracized, Pope Francis told journalists after his weekend-long trip to Brazil. Answering a question about reports of homosexuality in the clergy, the Pope answered, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Now, he went on to say, in that same segment of the press conference, about the catechism.
Yes, that's right. And that part doesn't get included in the articles you read in the secular media because they have an agenda. They don't want to point people towards what the Church really teaches, and that it's perennial and that's not going to change. That's just a fact. They don't want to accept. They latch on to something they can just grab, make a soundbite, and then just completely spin to say things like this. We also heard it about the priestly celibacy, and I mean, they just take something that the Holy Father says in a conversation in these interviews and just completely distort it. So we have to remember, where are we getting our news, and are we being truly informed?
And I also think this is an opportunity for us to do what the Holy Father said, to reflect upon the Catechism and what the Church actually teaches about this. And I think that's really important, and that's why we went to the people to whom we spoke. Of course, we heard from Robin Teresa Beck in our first segment in this 3-part mini-series within the series, talking about her story. She was completely healed of her same-sex attraction. And in our last episode, we had the clip from Dan Matson, who we're going to hear from again in a minute, where he was has a homosexual inclination, but came back to the Church because he was miserable living that lifestyle.
Exactly. And what he was saying was, it was in the Church where he found truth. He resonated with him, and he has chosen, he said, I still have to work at this. I feel I have that attraction, but I have chosen to live a celibate life, a life of chastity.
Well,
and that's what he's embracing.
Let's see what he has to say, and it's also, I think, beautiful what he has to say about how do we treat our brothers and sisters who are dealing with this attraction. It's all about the love, of course, not condoning any type of activity, but understanding that they too are made in the image and likeness of God. He has a lot of beautiful things to say. Let's take a listen.
One of the biggest questions I get as I go around the country is from parents. Some of them wondering about a son or daughter who might live a same-sex attraction, or someone whose son or daughter recently came out or something. They said, what should we do? And usually the first reaction is, with everything else, well, we need to fix this. You know, they want to solve the problem or whatever. And I tell them, the first thing to do is to listen, and then listen some more. Tell your child that you love him or her unconditionally. Listen some more, and then listen some more. And then learn from other people, learn what the Church says. The most important thing that child needs to hear is your unconditional love. And you can say at the time, just briefly, say, well, you know, we do think that the Church is right in this area, but I want to know what this has been like for you. Focus on, ask the child, say, what has your experience been like? I had no idea. Or if you had an idea, man, I had an idea, but I wondered, what has this been like for you? Listen and love them. And then educate yourself. There's the Courage Apostolate has as an organization for parents and Courage. And there's such wonderful people. Come to a Courage conference, get on the listserv. There's local groups all over the country, and there's more and more because this is a burgeoning need. You know, and there's a difference between accepting the person and making that clear. I love you unconditionally. We have to separate the person from the desire, from the behavior. And I feel that when the biggest thing is to not try to fix it or solve your child, but to listen and then get education about how to communicate the good news of the church. And depending on where the child is, perhaps it's the return to the church is not going to come through the parents. I know some dear friends who have, for 25 years been waiting for their son to come back to the church, and I view it as St. Monica and St. Augustine. But then the other aspect that is so important about this is to realize that when a son or daughter reveals this to a parent, this is allowed by God in the parent's life so that they can grow deeper in their own spiritual walk. That's one thing we find with the parents of Encourage, which is so beautiful, is they start coming to the Courage Conference thinking, well, we need to really worry about our kids' spiritual growth. But then they realize that God, in His wonderful plan, is weaving this and drawing them closer to Him. And the closer that the parents become, get to Christ. With any topic and any passionate thing that people have zeal for, there's always that fringe group that's pushing very hard. And I think that, I would say that the vast majority of my friends who are openly gay and things like that would not support that stifling of the free speech of the president of Mozilla. For me, it is heartening to see that pushback is happening within the gay community. I mean, where is this desire for free speech and this commitment to free speech in this world we have? So, but I don't really like talking about the political stuff or the battle for same-sex marriage or all those things. My passion and zeal is more for the individual person and their pastoral care.
Pastoral care of the person, so important, and that's the heart of it. I wanted to make reference to someone he mentioned in that clip. He was talking about the former head of Mozilla, Firefox. Of course, there was a big firestorm when that person was forced out of his job. It was revealed that he put, what was it, $1,000? You're from California. $1,000 to
Proposition 8.
Proposition 8, and
Proposition 8 was
to ban same-sex marriage,
which was eventually, it was approved by the voters 3 times, and eventually overturned by the courts. In the courts.
Yeah.
But they discovered that he had donated this money. He was a Christian. He believed in marriage as God ordained it between a man and a woman. And not only was he forced out of his job,
he was demonized.
He was demonized. And it was just awful
terrible.
what he was put through. And that's what Dan is referring to. This sometimes, unfortunately, is the price that believers pay when they support the truth about marriage. So it is. It can be very nerve-wracking for people, because how do you express this? Do the 1 Peter 3:15, thing, which is always be ready to give a defense for the hope that is within you, but to do it with gentleness and reverence. As he said, you have to love the person, but you have to separate that person from the activity.
The activity they're doing.
This is probably the area that has the least amount of information for people. I think a lot of Christians become, tongue-tied when this topic comes up, because they want to be charitable, but it seems that no matter what you say, you feel like you are being mean, to somebody, or as the media says, intolerant, of something that should be tolerated according to,
Not
the
only
secular
tolerated,
media.
embraced, promoted,
Absolutely.
Well,
Celebrated.
the other thing Dan pointed out, you heard what he said. Courage Ministry and the people he's involved with, they don't get involved with all the political rhetoric. That's a small minority, really, of the population.
But they have
the
they have
gay and
most of the
lesbian
audience,
community,
though. Those
but they
people.
have the audience.
Right.
They have the big megaphone. And I think the other problem is why people don't want to speak out. It has to do the same like with abortion. Why don't people want to talk much about abortion? Because everyone knows someone who's had an abortion. Everyone has someone maybe in their family or a good friend, and they feel they're going to hurt them, or you don't understand their pain. Well, many of us have friends who are homosexuals that are in our family or very good close friends. They're in our lives, and they're good people, and they're good citizens, and they're not out at these protests and doing all this radical stuff, and that's what Dan is saying. This has to be a kind and gentle conversation and about pastoral care and ministry to souls. And I think that's why people feel all tongue-tied, because when you want to talk about it, it's kind of like you're getting shut down, just like we get shut down when we want to talk about abortion.
They know
for the
about
same
it.
reason.
But Courage, this ministry that Dan is a part of, it's a beautiful ministry of the church, and the Vatican, of course, supports it wholeheartedly.
And it was founded, by Father
Father
Harvey.
Harvey.
Yeah,
in New York,
in
right.
1980. So it's been around for so long. Now there are chapters in Mexico, Latin America. Courage Latino was started in 2002, which is
Wow.
a big need also in the Hispanic
Now,
community.
that means that everything is translated into Spanish, and they have
Absolutely.
Spanish speakers who are giving testimonies. People like Dan and Robin from our other show, now for the
Now in
Hispanic
Spanish
community.
and all over Latin America, and because it's so needed. But the beautiful thing about that ministry is it's a prayer, prayer and spirituality ministry. Basically, you go there to know your faith and grow spiritually. They're not necessarily there to reform people, change them, although they support people's path, just like Robin's. But it's a safe place, as Dan was saying, to encounter Christ, to grow. So we really encourage people, no matter who you are, or if you know somebody or you don't, go to Courage website, couragerc.net. Find out about what the church teaches and its beautiful ministry of healing, because Dan does describe his condition of being someone with same-sex attraction as a wound, as something that he feels is like a disability. And the Catechism does call it objectively disordered, and he's okay with that. He says that's what it is. But it's something that God
But he
allowed.
doesn't identify himself by that.
It doesn't become his.
Right.
And that's what Courage says. We don't want people to just feel like they are somebody who is, as the media describes, gay. You're a gay person. No, he says, I have this
Same-sex attraction.
but it does
Or this
not
inclination.
define.
Right.
It does not define me. That's really
Define me.
important.
That's what's very important. Also, too, I like what he pointed out was for parents. Like you said, Courage website, but within the Courage website is Encourage, which is for the parents of children. And what did he say? If your child first comes out and says, I have a same-sex attraction, what do you do? What did he say? Listen to them, and listen to them some more, and then also pray for them, and be there as an openness. I think too often people they want to ostracize people, and say,
Or on the opposite end, they feel that automatically they have to accept, embrace, and celebrate that
Yeah.
lifestyle if they're in that lifestyle. Let's take a break. We have a lot more to talk about. And also, as Astrid and Janet have pointed out, a number of really good resources for you, including Courage and the Encourage Ministry. We'll be right back on The Catholic View for Women on EWTN. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Catholic View for Women, and in this segment we're discussing the Pope's quote, "Who am I to judge? What does that mean, and how do we apply it in our everyday lives?" regarding the very sensitive issue of homosexuality. What does the Church teach? We're looking at those questions and also hearing from people who have been in that lifestyle and come home to the Catholic Church. Now, Astrid, you wanted to talk more about parents and some of the things they go through.
Something that Dan said really struck me, which was that he felt that God is using this cross, because it's a cross, of the same-sex attraction that parents are dealing with in their children, as a way to sanctify them. Because, like Romans 8:28, all things work for the good of those who love God.
Yeah.
In God's permissive will, they have this disordered condition, but because the parents care enough and they go to Courage and they go to Encourage for parents parents. They're learning more about what the church teaches and about the invitation that God is giving them to heal, to unite as a family, and to love their children unconditionally, for their children to feel that unconditional love, which is not condoning the behavior. It's saying, I love you even in your woundedness and your brokenness. I love you, because that's how God loves us, and parents are called to that same love for their children. So it's a very healing ministry. I think everyone should visit this website, find out more about it, and understand things in the big picture of salvation, of what God allows in our life can be also a path to sanctity.
Well, also to, both Dan and even Robin in our previous show, they talked about too the many years they spent in the lifestyle, actively in this lifestyle, how damaging they felt it was to them. Although at the time they weren't realizing it, but their lives were really on a downward spiral gradually. At the time, they thought, they were doing the right thing for themselves, and they were really deep into this lifestyle. And I remember Robin saying that within, she had 12 different partners within a certain period of time. And she said, finally it was going into that church and getting the ashes, which they did kind of like as a spoof, more or less, but it had such a power, on her. It took her still another 6 months to come out of the lifestyle totally and feel healed. But she talked about when looking back, this was a very damaging lifestyle that I was in. That's what she said, and all those different partners. And she was kept looking for love. And when she actually went in for ashes, she thought that this partner was like the one for her. This was going to be finally that relationship that was going to work. But God used that. His grace is always there. And sometimes we have our ears, fingers in our ears going, we're not listening to Him. We're not looking for that grace. But those ashes were the start of the first step for her to come back. And also for Dan, he also, he said, I have that same-sex attraction. And he was in this lifestyle for many, many years. So, I think people have to understand that it's not a switch that gets flipped in your brain, 1, 2, 3, that, okay, I'm going to walk away from this lifestyle. It's a constant struggle for a lot of people. It's an ongoing process. And that you should seek spiritual direction. A good priest to walk the walk with you as a spiritual director can help you. Once you realize, I want to take some steps, find a good spiritual director who can help advise you and get you on the right path.
One thing that's really frustrating to me is that we're not discussing this beyond these circles. So we do provide great resources here on EWTN and many of our radio programs as well. I know Catholic Answers Live, which is a terrific apologetic show, has addressed this issue quite frequently and giving us some additional resources on how to deal with these people lovingly while still affirming and maintaining and upholding the church teaching. But we need to allow these people to speak out in the public, and their voices are not allowed. They are accused, they're shut down, they're accused of being brainwashed. Or that someone, is forcing them into saying something against their will, and that's not true. And I think in the last show we may have mentioned, or at least I know we've talked about it to Dan when we did the interview, that there are resources within the Courage and Encourage ministry, not just to help people within those families that are dealing with this issue, but to take it to the parish, to have this type of discussion that we're having. And to hear from people like Dan and Robin, that's what they're really trying to do, to get out there at the parish level to help us help them.
Well, as a matter of fact, at the Courage website, they have a new DVD program that's been designed for parishes to use that goes with a study guide. I mean, this would be a wonderful resource. And I think, for our viewers, why don't you make your parish priests aware that this exists, that there's a new resource out now? Because I think also, priests from the pulpit are also, cautious about going into this subject, again, because of what society has done, shut you down on this topic. It's kind of like with abortion. We're not going to talk about abortion because we might hurt the women who've had abortions. Well, we're not going to talk about homosexuality and the gay lifestyle because we don't want to hurt the people.
But how many people are struggling who don't even know that these ministries exist? Just like with Silent No More, how many women and men are in the pews but don't know, that there's healing available?
For years.
And like Father Pavone always says, silence does not interpret itself. Unless we begin to talk about these things, people don't realize there's help, there's resources. And I think you have to start with the people who go to Sunday Mass. Like you just mentioned, Teresa, there's all this good Catholic programming. But even still, at Sunday Mass goers, how many people tune into EWTN on a regular basis? How many listen to you
They're
every
going
day?
to Mass Sunday to Sunday, but they're not doing anything in between.
They're not being fed by all the good things out there.
They're being fed by the secular media.
The secular media. They watch the major news networks and they think, oh, look, the church is down on these people. Oh, isn't that terrible? But they're getting sucked in by the lies the media is telling telling
even
them.
in confirmation, RCIA, so many of these programs, if we don't get to the minds of our
Right, young
parishioners
people.
first, the media is going to indoctrinate them, is going to tell them what to think. And I see this a lot in young people that I work with in the pro-life movement. I mean, if we don't teach them thoroughly about sexuality in terms of theology of the body, what the church teaches, the beauty of the vision of God's plan for sexuality, then the culture is going to, the current culture is going to indoctrinate
It's interesting you
them.
should say that. Let me just tell you a little story that happened in my archdiocese back home in southeastern Michigan, where a friend of mine who's a pastor at a local parish did a beautiful homily regarding marriage, and was just talking about the church teaching and talking about the truth as God ordained it, and nothing offensive. He wasn't negative. He was just very uplifting and promoting marriage. Well, there was someone in church that day who actually worked with him at the parish and really went after him and said, "You're being intolerant. How can you do this? Blah, blah, blah." Now, this was somebody who worked in the church who went after a priest for speaking the truth. And I know this priest. He does a beautiful job and he actually works with Courage in the Archdiocese of Detroit, so he knows how to address this issue. And yet in his own parish, he was attacked. Now he dealt with it, and it didn't stop him from speaking out. But that's probably why, just as with abortion and other issues, that some pastors may back down because they're a little concerned about how it will be received.
Look at what Dan is saying. He said, when you're being shut down, he says, please be more bold. Please tell the truth. We need to hear it the same way that women that have had abortion said, "Thank you for speaking up. Now I can begin to heal."
Well, and just like the testimonies of the women of Silent No More, the Courage Ministry has testimonies of people like Dan.
Right.
And what we need to do, just like you spread the testimonies of the women who've been healed from abortion, you need to talk about those testimonies too and spread those. Can you imagine if you put one of those testimonies in a parish bulletin? So
I was just going
people-
to say that parish bulletin would be a great place.
Great place, because then people could read it and say, "Oh wow, I never even thought about that." Well, I just want to point out, because it's going to be in our homework, we have to look at the catechism, like the Holy Father said in that press conference. And of course, the reporters didn't want to hear it. But in our catechism,
They kind of forgot that part.
I think Pope Francis should have read the catechism right on the plane to them.
Or maybe he could have held it up and then they would have maybe taken a shot of that, but maybe they would have edited it out.
doubt it.
I don't know. I doubt it. Yeah.
But
Never
it's-
mind.
We're going to start with 2357. This is what the Catechism says. Homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction toward persons of the same sex. It has taken a great variety of forms through the centuries and in different cultures. Its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained. Basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity, tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. They are contrary to the natural law. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine, affective, and sexual complementarity. Under no circumstances can they be approved. Clear. Absolutely clear. And then I think I have time for just one more, and everyone can read it more for homework. 2347, homosexual persons are called to chastity by the virtues of self-mastery that teach them their inner freedom, at times by the support of disinterested friendships. By prayer and sacramental grace, they can and should gradually and resolutely approach Christian perfection.
We're all called to chastity.
We're all called to
Right.
chastity.
This is not
All.
something that we're telling people with, that the church is telling people with an inclination,
No.
that's only reserved for them. Every person,
Not just for them.
heterosexual, it's the same
Exactly.
thing.
Exactly.
And also the Catechism, I know we don't have time for it, but the Catechism goes on to talk about how discrimination against people with the same-sex attraction is not acceptable. It's wrong.
Wrong.
And that they have to be treated with love and respect because we're all made in the image and likeness of God.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's been a good discussion. I'm really hoping that by putting Robin and also Dan out there on the airwaves, that more people will maybe ask them to speak at their parish, that more people will go to the Courage and Encourage websites and get some of those resources, and be willing, we mentioned the parish bulletin, be willing to write an article in the bulletin and encourage your priest to have the courage, no pun intended, to talk about it.
Exactly.
So, homework.
Homework, of course, number one is to visit the Courage and Encourage websites, which is couragerc.net, as Astrid had said earlier. Of course, the Catechism, as always, available at the Religious Catalog here at the network, passages 2357 to 59. And then finally, we're going to have a link on our website to read the documents that have been issued by the Congregation of the Faith. And of course, Holy reminders help us all, and I want to remind everyone of our Madonna of the Kitchen, available at the Religious Catalog. She's our patroness for these programs, and I know when holy reminders are around your house, it helps you to stay connected to Jesus.
Right. I always like to get one of those images of the Lord where the eyes follow you.
Yes,
I think that's very good. Yeah. And you know, I think it's so beautiful when you have those images. We've been talking a lot in this series about some of the bad images out there in terms of the media and pornography and whatnot. Really important to have the beautiful images of our faith. And always, really, again, 1 Peter 3:15, always be ready to give a defense for the hope that is within you, but to do it with gentleness and reverence. Love one another. All right, well.
And then also, too, I want to remind everyone they can be in touch with us.
Oh, that's right, our e-newsletter.
We have a new e-newsletter, and they just go to thecatholicviewforwomen.com, sign up there, and every month you'll get what's doing with Janet, Astrid, and Teresa, whether we're traveling, and we're going to be answering through that e-letter the bulk of the questions that come in on a daily basis based on you watching our programs. We're going to have synopsis of that and any new items to address. So get our e-letter, go to thecatholicviewforwomen.com and do your homework.
That's right, and check out our Facebook page too.
Exactly.
Which is growing.
Like
our
us,
following is growing.
friend us
Yes,
on
friend us on
Facebook.
Share
Facebook.
it, too.
Thanks again for watching. I'm Teresa Tamio along with Janet Morana and Astrid Bennett Gutierrez for The Catholic View for Women. We'll see you next time on The Catholic View.